Rink-wide Vancouver, Jeff Patterson along with Irfan Gaffar. It's the first official rink-wide of the offseason. Obviously, we've been doing these for, 6 weeks since the Canucks got punted from the playoffs, but the Stanley Cup has been presented. We'll get around to that a little bit later on, but really it's all about this next week, the NHL Draft, the awards, and beyond that, free agency. And I don't know about you, but I am a little surprised, quite frankly, that it's been as quiet as it has been for the Vancouver Canucks. Philip Hronek news feels like it was ages ago now. And this is a front office that has earned the trust of the fan base. I think gets the benefit of the doubt that it's going to get things done. But guess what? We are in the final week of June. July 1st it's right there in the offing. It's Monday. And really, the Vancouver Canucks have done nothing but the Philip Hronek signing. They've got all these UFAs, and they're not going to keep them all, but are they going to be able to keep any of them?
Well, that's the funny thing. It's you haven't heard much, and sometimes no news is good news. But when things start to come out and you hear things and ear to the ground a little bit, sometimes no news is not so good news either, Jeff, for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, look, I don't think it's a secret. Elias Lindholm, we know that, probably tests the open market, ends up elsewhere. Nikita Zadorov, the last time we did this, I didn't want to say the door was fully closed on him heading to unrestricted free agency, but as we inch closer to the draft here in a couple of days, and July 1st, like you mentioned, right around the corner, it's just talking to a few more people. It sounds like it is trending in that direction. Eerily quiet around Dakota Joshua, right? Yeah. And that's the one where we haven't heard anything on. So that's almost, unless something crazy happens here in the next little while as we record this, nothing has gone on there with Dakota Joshua and the Vancouver Canucks. And then you look at guys like Sam Lafferty. Obviously, we know the news of Ian Cole, who's not going to be around next season. And then the only one that you can probably think that is going to happen is Tyler Myers. But it's not the sexiest of names for Canucks fans, and maybe not the one that they were hoping to get. But it's still pretty quiet around these parts here in Vancouver for the Canucks.
Yeah, and Teddy Bluger as well. And I think the Canucks want to keep Teddy Bluger. And those deals feel like ones that they should be able to get done. But I suppose they have an internal pecking order. I thought the Hronek deal and some cost certainty there might get the ball rolling on getting some of these other ones done. But maybe they want to chip away at a couple of those bigger contracts rather than eating up. I mean, every dollar spent matters when you are trying to come up with a plan here, whether it's your own free agents or getting into the market on Monday in July 1st. So, I not worried. There is time here. The old, it only takes a phone call. But as we move to the middle now of this week, and we record this on Wednesday morning, just surprised that the Canucks haven't been able to check off a couple of boxes. They did get minor deals done with Linus Karlsson and Cole McWard late last week. Those are depth signings. Although McWard is interesting to me. Just first of all, Patrick Allvin name-checked him when he did the media availability after the Philip Hronek signing. And then the next day they come out and they sign Mark Friedman, who didn't get mentioned. But, McWard just turned 23. He's a right shot defenseman. We know the premium on that position, and he's played a couple of NHL games. So I think that there may be, we'll see. I'm not expecting him to crack the roster when the season begins, but I think they may have a player on their hands there in Cole McWard, and we'll see. So, good for them for at least getting him done and getting, keeping the depth guys in the fold. But that's not what this week is all about. This is about, trying to set the course for next season and beyond. And by the time you and I get together and do another one of these rink wides, it'll be interesting to see what the Vancouver Canucks look like, what they've been able to accomplish. The draft coming up, obviously fertile ground for trades, although the Canucks don't have a ton of trade chips to play. So I'm not expecting them to be terribly active on the trade front. I think this week is all about free agency for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, just want to take a sec here and let people know that Rink Wide is a presentation of the Applewood Auto Group. And right now at Applewood Mitsubishi Richmond, you can get a 2024 Outlander PHEV rate starting from 4.49% plus the industry's best warranty. Remember, it's all good at Applewood. Now, I know you're heading to Vegas. We'll talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you might expect to see going on. And I can tell people that the NHL Draft, while a big deal in NHL circles, it will not be the feature attraction of the weekend down in Vegas. But that's Vegas for you. We did see a little bit of movement I thought was curious around the NHL on Tuesday, and that was the Detroit Red Wings. And they are one of the teams to keep an eye on here, I think. They clear some salary, moving Jake Wallman and 2 years left on his deal, sent him to San Jose. I had to attach a second rounder, which is interesting and has some sort of Canuck implications in as much as if getting off 2 years of Jake Wallman at $3.4 million cost a second rounder, what does Ilya Mikheyev require as a sweetener with 4.75 remaining in each of his 2 years? And so just a little bit of hockey math there. But the Red Wings are one of the teams that have the most cap space available to them here over the next week. I think Detroit and the new team in Utah are going to be fascinating to see, what they do, how quickly they spend, what are they able to accomplish. But, Stevie Yzerman, pretty shrewd operator, keeps things close to the vest, doesn't say an awful lot for public consumption, but I don't think you make a kind of move like that the week before free agency without another plan B over on the offing, in the offing to with an eye to making something else happen. So for me, I think the Red Wings and Utah are two teams to really keep an eye on here over the course of the next week.
Also, a couple of cities are going to have to pay the tax on the cities that they live in to some players to want to go and live there as well. But yeah, you're right. The Detroit Red Wings are going to be in on everybody. I mean, Steve Yzerman, like you just mentioned, keeps things very close to his vest as to what they're going to do or what their plans are. But they're an interesting team, right? There was all that talk about Dylan Larkin and his contract and what the status was going to be there if he was going to end up being a Detroit Red Wing and things like that. But they've got some pieces on that team. It's going to take some work. I don't know if they can expedite the process by going hunting right away and getting these big name players. There's, thought that, Nikita Zadorov could be a guy that they're going to throw big money at. And obviously, that will resonate with people in these parts as well. But they're going to be on everyone because they have the money. And I think that's the biggest thing. And you look at a team like Utah, it's no secret Ryan Smith and his group are going to spend. I've heard from just a number of different people that the amount of money that they're going to throw at some of these free agents just to try and lure them if they can, and also to re-sign some of their own, it's going to be pretty large. And Utah's interesting, right? It's not a place where, that it's kind of off the beat path, right? Players don't really know anything much about the city too much. And you're probably going to have to pay people a little bit more to want to go and play in obviously those two cities. But those are two owners that are definitely going to be aggressive, and it's definitely going to be fun to watch here over the next little bit.
Yes, as I check the soon-to-be departed cap-friendly, the five teams with the most money to spend in free agency as things stand right now, Utah is at the top of the list, $45 million after all those years in Arizona. They have nobody under contract, essentially. I mean, they got Liam O'Brien signed, but they've got so much roster room and cap space, and all those years of not spending in the desert. We'll see what happens here with an aggressive new owner trying to make a splash. Anaheim is next, $54 million. Or check that, $33 million to spend, 42 for Utah, 33 for Anaheim. Chicago, Detroit is fourth on the list, and then you get the San Jose Sharks. Not expecting the Sharks, the Blackhawks, or the Ducks to, as you said, expedite anything. I think they're still a few years away from, being able to really accelerate their plans. But Detroit and Utah certainly look like wild cards to me, and we'll see what happens. And again, in this week leading up to the draft, you're almost guaranteed a couple of sizable trades at every draft. Sometimes it doesn't happen until the second day. We saw that with the Canucks and JT Miller back here in Vancouver in 2019, that before the events of the second day got going, the Canucks pulled off the Miller deal. But it just feels sort of like the climate is right. You get all the general managers and all the scouts together under one roof in the Sphere of all places this year. Have you been to the Sphere, by the way?
I haven't, but also for the last time, Jeff.
That's right.
Yeah, because they're not going to be able to do this again anymore. They're going to go to the NFL, NBA model of drafts where just the athletes show up.
I was fortunate. I saw you two in February. I'm really curious to see how the NHL uses the Sphere for the draft. Like, I on one hand, I think it's a novel approach. It's something different. Nobody else had done it. But man, after watching a concert in there, it feels like it's too much building. Quite frankly, with just all the video capability, like. Okay, so you're going to see a 30-foot high Macklin Celebrini, as his name is called. But by the time you get to the fifth or eighth guy, how many 30-foot videos of junior hockey players? Like, I just don't know. So maybe I'm underselling the NHL. Like, maybe they'll get this thing right, and we'll see. But I am kind of curious. It's it's not a conventional. And the NHL is a pretty conventional operator. This is stepping out of their comfort zone a little bit. So really curious to see what it looks like. And I'm curious to hear from you on the ground after the fact, how you thought it went. Before the draft, it is the NHL Awards. And this is where we bring it back to the Vancouver Canucks, because I think, and certainly I've been on the record for a while, figuring that this is Quinn Hughes' year to win the Norris. They've been handing out the awards. We know Rick Tocchet got the Coach of the Year, and Patrick Allvin was the runner-up for GM of the Year, and Elias Pettersson was the runner-up for the Lady Byng. So some of those have already been presented, but it's down to the final 5. It's really a scaled-down award show, and they're going to hand out the Norris, the Vezina, the Calder, the Hart, and the Ted Lindsay. So let's just quickly run through the awards that are up for grabs here. Are you with me?
Yep.
Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, and Roman Josi, 3 great finalists, all from the Western Conference. A big year for top defenseman in the National Hockey League in the West. But I just think the 92 points, the way that he tilts the ice for the Vancouver Canucks. And I think, this will be sort of the culmination of Quinn Hughes finally fighting his way out of that all-Canadian division season where, he was saddled with the plus-minus that, again, plus-minus is what it is. But it kind of felt like that stuck with him and followed him around, and he's had to work hard to, shed the label of a guy that was an offensive liability. As we know from watching on a nightly basis, his best defense is spending no time in his own zone and getting the puck up ice and then making things happen there. So, when he broke into the league, he certainly had that Norris potential, but he's in a golden age of terrific young defenseman.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to put together that one full season that was going to get him the nod, but I think he has, and hopefully it's the first of many for him. But in my mind, if Quinn Hughes doesn't win the Norris, then there has been a misjustice. Somehow justice hasn't been served.
Yeah, look, I think I agree with you. I think it's the Hughes Norris Trophy time. I think he's going to win it. I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to win it, but I also think that we need to sit here, you and I doing this, that we can think that when if we have ballots for Hughes for Norris, it would be first on our ballot. There's going to be ballots out there that don't have him first, just as there was for the Conn Smythe Trophy and a voter not having a single Florida Panther on their ballot. This is just it's the way it goes. It's the way voting goes and things like that. But I agree with you, Jeff. I mean, hopefully, this catapults him into bigger and better things and winning more individual awards. But I bet if you asked him, he'd trade the Norris Trophy for another couple of weeks in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I can guarantee you that, as would most of these guys that are up for some of these awards. The Vezina Trophy, Hellebuyck, Bobrovsky, and Thatcher Demko. If Demko didn't get hurt, maybe he could have had his name in a conversation. Otherwise, it's probably just a free trip to Vegas for Thatcher and his family.
Yeah, I think this one's Hellebuyck's. He had that run from November through January where he didn't give up more than 3 goals in a game, 30 some odd games.
Silly. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Demko, you're right. The injury, obviously he was first 6 weeks of the season. Thatcher Demko was the best goalie in the NHL. There's no doubt about that. And then Hellebuyck kind of took over. Not that Demko's play dropped a ton, but the injury in March, obviously, durability is a factor in this, and Hellebuyck able to play a ton and play at a super high level. And Sergei Bobrovsky along for the ride. I don't think he's going to care that he doesn't win the Vezina this time around. He got his big prize on Monday night. Calder, for a brief moment, I think the Calder got interesting when Connor Bedard got injured, and nobody wanted to see that. But Brock Faber, as a defenseman doing the things that he did, the amount of ice time that he logged in Minnesota makes a compelling case in other years. But when you have a superstar burst onto the scene like Connor Bedard with the hype, I think he did enough in the minds of the voters, and maybe some reputation votes here. Can you have a reputation after 1 year in the league? But just all the, the build up ahead of him being the first overall pick last year. And we should throw in that it's a big night for the Hughes family because Luke's up. He's the other finalist for the Calder. But I do think that when all is said and done, Connor Bedard is your Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and I think that one is, I don't think it's going to be close either. I think that just, he's one of those players, we throw out the word generational often. I think he can be. I think the skill set, the shot, everything that we've seen from him, the work ethic, the things that he does and gets ready for games and of that nature, he is that guy, and he's going to be that guy for a very long time for the Chicago Blackhawks, who I also want to add in on that mix of maybe Detroit and Utah being aggressive and interesting. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are definitely going to be in on a lot of players here as we head into free agency. But yeah, back to your point, I think it's definitely another Calder Trophy, the Calder Trophy for Connor Bedard.
So the other two are the Hart and the Lindsay, kind of go hand in hand. One is voted on by the NHL writers. The other is the peer group, the players themselves vote on the Ted Lindsay. Nathan MacKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, Connor McDavid up for the Hart. The Lindsay is McKinnon, Kucherov, and Austin Matthews coming off his incredible season in Toronto. But I think this is Nathan MacKinnon's time for me, at least. He's my pick. And again, you're splitting hairs between three incredible finalists that all had these amazing seasons. But for me, I think Nate MacKinnon probably walks away with both of these. But I am interested to see how much weight Austin Matthews in the goal scoring title carries among the peer group. Like, it's hard to get to 70 goals in today's National Hockey League. If it was easy, more guys would do it. Obviously, more guys would get close. The season that Austin Matthews had was phenomenal. But and again, I'm not a voter, so it doesn't really matter here, but I'm thinking it's a double for Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you didn't even mention Kucherov.
I know.
I know. Ridiculous year.
Yeah.
I think voters won't give it to him just based on how many times Tampa's won and you know all the things or whatever that he did after, and $9 million over the cap and the T-shirt and all of that. I think that resonates with some people that have votes for these types of awards, but I think Kucherov takes one of them. I mean, I'm not entirely sure his teammates are gonna, or his peers are gonna vote for him for that one. I think Austin Matthews and the Ted Lindsay is interesting because of your point, what you just mentioned there. Of 70 goals is hard. Like, that is very hard to do in this National Hockey League. But you mentioned it might be Nate time. It might just be time for him to win the Hart. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see that one, because I think that one might be some that's going to be up for debate, because the one guy might not win both. Or one player might not win both. Like, MacKinnon might not win both, but there could be a one and one wins the other. So it'll be fun to see.
Hey, we always love feedback here at Rink Wide, and the Great Clips chat line always open. More than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada. Great Clips, the world's largest hair salon brand, official hair salon of the National Hockey League. For more information, check them out online. GreatClips.com. Great Clips. It's going to be great. You can see all of our feedback channels on the screen if you are watching this on YouTube. And again, hit us up. Any thoughts on free agency, what you think the Vancouver Canucks may do here in the days and weeks ahead. Now, again, you're heading to Vegas. You'll be there for the draft. I don't know about you, but I can't recall less draft buzz in this market. Maybe ever, but certainly in a long, long time. And there have been other years the Canucks haven't had a first rounder. Just as a refresher, they don't have a first or a second rounder. The first went to Calgary in the Elias Lindholm deal. The second was the sweetener to move off Jason Dickinson's contract at the start of last season. And that's what it cost. And we talked about sweeteners earlier in the program. But this is where that second rounder wound up, was in Chicago to move off the Jason Dickinson deal. So the Vancouver Canucks are going to be bystanders. They're going to sit and wait and watch until the 93rd pick in the third round on Saturday. And it's funny, I was doing a piece for Canucks Army, or history not really on the Canucks side here when they don't have a first round selection. And of course you find your elite talent at the top of the draft. The further you go, the more you're hoping at that point. This is the third time in 5 drafts that the Vancouver Canucks have not had a first round pick. And so when we talk about the prospect pool not being that deep, that sort of underscores it right there. 3 times now in 5 drafts, they have peddled their first rounder. The last 4 times that the Vancouver Canucks have not drafted in the first round, they have completely whiffed in those drafts. 20 and 21. So 2020, 2021, nothing to show for those. And they may not get an NHL game out of either one of those drafts, which, at a time when entry-level contracts are so valuable and you're trying to support and surround a good team with players on manageable contracts, I'm not sure that they're going to get an NHL game out of the 20 or the 21 draft. We'll see about that. And you just look at that 2021 draft, and Danila Klimovich was their second rounder, their first pick that year. Logan Stankoven obviously has burst onto the scenes and become a regular in the National Hockey League. Matthew Nyes was also taken after Klimovich in that second round. So a couple of guys that have stepped in and already done good things in the National Hockey League, and we both would look pretty good in the Canuck uniform, but we can play that game all day long about players forever. That the Canucks overshot or overlooked or missed. And look, when you're in a second round, lots of teams obviously passed on them for whatever reasons. But this just again emphasizes the job that Patrick Allvin and his staff have to do in terms of trying to unearth, whether it's guys that have gone through the draft and are free agents or European free agents or college players, and they didn't sign many. I think they had one college guy this year. We talked about Cole McWard earlier in the program, but again, trying to round out a roster on affordable contracts, that becomes part of the challenge for the Vancouver Canucks, and they just don't have a whole lot of draft capital. So anybody sitting on pins and needles waiting for the Vancouver Canucks in the draft class of 2024, fingers and toes crossed, I guess, that somehow, somewhere, they unearth a hidden gem here deep in the draft, because they're going to Vegas without many chips to play.
No, and I think that for most Vancouver Canuck fans, this draft is, we'll scroll the internet and see if, something pops up, but you're not looking for a trade in the draft. You're looking for a trade, a hockey trade, a quote unquote hockey trade for them to try and, improve their team that way. I mean, Jeff, the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup. They had 4 players that they drafted. Right. And look, it's the Florida Panthers, and I get it. And you can sign free agents and you can acquire them to play there because it's the non-tax state and things like that. But there are teams that have done it and have found success. There are teams that have made trades with teams and have found success, and guys have signed there and wanted to be there and called that city their own. So there's definitely ways of improving your hockey team. But to the point of the draft for the Vancouver Canucks, you mentioned 20 and 21 and it being an absolute dud. You're going to need guys on entry-level contracts. I don't think it's going to be a secret where they're going to have guys that are playing on entry-level contracts each and every year for probably the next 4 or 5 years, just so they're able to fit guys in the cap and make it work and have these guys make an impact. Cole McWard, you mentioned his name kind of off the top there, Patrick Allvin alluding to him. They need him to try and compete for a roster spot. Guys like, Jonathan Lecker-Mackey, and players like that, hoping to crack this team's roster. DPD, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but at some point he's got to make the team here. And I think that's definitely one of the things that they're hoping for. But this draft for the Vancouver Canucks and for the fans, it's honestly if they do something via trade. And I think that just from talking to some people around different types of hockey circles, I think that this one, just based on the fact that it's not that deep after the top 5 or 6 picks, like when you hear number 7's involved and 8's involved and teams are willing to give up those picks, it means it's not that deep. So teams are going to try other ways to improve their hockey club.
Yeah, and when we talk about trade chips for the Vancouver Canucks, they don't have a ton. You mentioned Lecker-Mackey and Tom Olander. I think that they're high on both of those. And at the trade deadline, when they were in on Gensel, those were the types of names that were coming up, and the Canucks were loath to part with them. I think they still are. The 2025 first rounder is in play, but again, like, how many first rounders can you peddle and not have that come back to haunt you at some point? Now, we've seen Vegas has been really aggressive in trying to build a Stanley Cup winner, and it worked for them. And you talked about Florida. You're right. It's been a little unconventional. Credit to Bill Zito and the way that he's gone about building that hockey club. I do wonder are we ever going to get to the point, and we saw it again this week, these NBA trades, 4 first rounders out the window. If you've got your eye on a star player, that's just something that this conservative National Hockey League just doesn't seem ready to embrace.
They're scared. All the GMs are scared. They get into these rooms together and they walk on the draft floor and they call each other still on the landline of the draft when they can walk over to the table next to them. They're scared. All of them are scared. No one wants to go out and make the big move. No one wants to be that aggressive GM that goes and does it. Now, whether that's the owner telling them that you have to be very careful. I'm not talking about the Vancouver Canucks here. I'm just talking about in general. Whether it's owners telling their GMs that you got to be careful of what you do, whether it's the president of hockey ops that's getting involved in certain things, you're not going to see it. It's just not going to happen. Offer sheets, as much as we want to talk about it, are things that probably aren't going to happen as much either when teams don't want to give up picks. But yeah, the Vancouver Canucks 2025 first round pick is probably in play. It's there if they want to do it. And you mentioned, might come back to haunt them. But the Vegas Golden Knights, it's interesting because who are they going to pick to trade? Basically, because they're a team that's going to have to go into this and be competitive and stay competitive. For the Vancouver Canucks, Jeff, they're 1 win away from the conference finals. Like, anything beyond getting that far again will not be deemed as a successful season, in my opinion, for this organization, right? You can only hope that Elias Pettersson gets better and shows up in the playoffs. So that's One, because he didn't do that last season. And then you're going to improve your hockey team, because if you can't, you're not bringing your team back as assembled. It's a foregone conclusion that you're going to lose guys for sure. So it's how are you going to improve, and how are you going to do it under the cap and get creative of ways to trying to figure that out. So definitely a fun job as we can sit here and talk about it all day long of what the Canucks should do, what they will do, and what they won't do. But in the end, it's going to be up to Patrick Allvin if he wants to pull that trigger on anything.
Want to talk about the Stanley Cup Final here in a sec, but before we do that, just a little news nugget that has sort of surfaced here with the Vancouver Canucks perhaps eyeing a junior hockey franchise. Yeah. I'll talk to you or ask you about that in a moment, but Rink Wide brought to you in part by the Vancouver Canadians, who are back at the Nat. They're on a 9-game homestand, so lots of opportunities to get out to the ballpark. Thursday is a fireworks night. Friday is a nooner, and Canada Day on Monday offers another nooner at Nat Bailey Stadium. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday nooners, superstar appearances all summer long. Get your tickets. Call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Now, I saw you tweet out, I had retweeted a story out of the Prince George Citizen that suggested that the Vancouver Canucks were among interested parties in the Prince George Cougars. Now, the Cougars say they're not for sale. They have sort of refuted this notion that the team is up for sale. Apparently, one of the investors is looking to move on, but Eric Brewer and Dan Hamhuis, former NHLers, BC Boys, former Prince George Cougars, they're part of that investment group as well. Whatever the case, to me, the interesting part was that the Vancouver Canucks were among the groups that were interested in purchasing the Cougars and moving them to Chilliwack. Now, of course, the Western Hockey League's been in Chilliwack before. That team moved to Victoria. The Fraser Valley just feels like it's sort of at a saturation point with all the various levels of hockey, from the Vancouver Giants and the Abbotsford Canucks and BC Hockey League teams. And but we have known that the Canucks have kicked tires before on the rink in Chilliwack and also looking at other Western Hockey League teams. So I'm not surprised at this report, but I saw that you confirmed that, yes, indeed, the Vancouver Canucks have shown interest in the Prince George Cougars. Yeah,
definitely interested. I think the process of them maybe moving to Chilliwack would definitely be something that they would be interested in. The price is just high. I mean, I think in the report it said $8 million. I think that's a little high, even for the Vancouver Canucks, standpoint. But it's no secret, it's out there that they're definitely looking and would be interested in, having another team locally under their umbrella. Obviously, it'd be part of the Aquilini group, but why not, right? If you can manage a way to do it and, reach even further than Abbotsford and go to Chilliwack or go further if you have to, why not do it if you're the Vancouver Canucks and have another, set of farm or baby farm kind of right in your backyard here. So definitely interested, but I think right now the price is going to be a little bit too high for them.
Yeah, and look, there's precedent here. I mean, the Calgary Flames ownership group owns the Flames. They own the Calgary Wranglers. They own the Calgary Hitmen. Like, there's 3 levels of hockey all in the same city. So this isn't quite the same city. It would be the same area. And again, the Canucks have been known to be looking to acquire a junior hockey team at some point here. So we'll see where this one goes. Again, the Cougars say they're not for sale, so maybe it's not this transaction, perhaps, or maybe this is all just part of the negotiation, but certainly some interest from the Vancouver Canucks in getting into the Western Hockey League. All right, you're heading to Vegas when? Thursday?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It should be fun. Going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm excited to see the Sphere. Not excited for the 125 degrees or whatever it is going to be there. Not a big heat guy, but we'll see what happens. I mean, look, the Sphere, it's the first time I think that people outside of the Sphere will get to see the Sphere at work on the inside. I think that's the big thing for the NHL. It's the first time anything in there will be televised. First sporting event, basically, first really anything. So the NHL, I definitely know, has done an insane job at preparing for this. Their staff and their event staff has gone above and beyond to make this the perfect event, as they usually try and do for some of these things. But, you've been there, and, after 30-foot tall Macklin Celebrini, I'm not sure I'm going to want to see any more either. So it'll be fun to see and kind of catch your eye for a little bit. But the press box might be kind of fun for me.
Well, I'm curious about that whole setup because, again, for people that haven't been to the Sphere, the seats, and there's like 20,000 seats, but they're all on one side. Like, this isn't a conventional hockey rink in the round. One side of the building is just nothing but video screens, and then all of the seating, and it stretches like so high. So I'm curious, the conventional draft floor, and then the risers for the media and all that kind of, like, I am, again, this won't affect people watching on television, but I am curious about sort of the logistics of the setup there. I see that Frank Saravalli and Tyler Yaremchuk are already down there. So you can catch Daily Faceoff every morning, 9 o'clock Pacific time. And we want to mention as well, the Daily Faceoff live free agency special comes to you on July the 1st from 8 a.m. until 11 o'clock Pacific time. Tyler and Frank and former NHLers Carter Hutton, Colby Cohen, all over all the stories. I'm going to make an appearance sort of repping Vancouver here. I'll check in with those guys on a couple of occasions as well. So if you're looking for something a little different perhaps this year, new place to get your info on free agency, we'll be breaking it all down, the signings, the impact on teams, trying to predict the future of free agency and give you the inside scoop on everything going on July 1st, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific, the Daily Faceoff live free agency special. You're not going to want to miss it. All right. So you're going into Vegas. You talked about it. It was warm. It was warm in South Florida as well. It really got hot on Monday night. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers. Certainly an interesting route to get to the 4 wins that they needed to get their hands on the Stanley Cup. But in the end, can't take it away from them. The Cats are the champs for 2024. What did you make of Monday night?
The Cats came back the very next year, Jeff. Right?
Yep.
That's exactly what they did. You lose in the Cup final against the Vegas Golden Knights, and by all accounts, that team was absolutely riddled by injuries. Matthew Tkachuk, the broken sternum. It's funny, he mentioned in a post-game interview, I don't remember sure who it was. He said, I had to get my brother to help me get out of bed last year because I had a broken sternum, and I'm going to have to help him get me out of bed for other reasons because they're going to be celebrating that Stanley Cup for a long time. And as they should. I mean, look, they were a wagon of a hockey team. I think people slept on them a little bit in the regular season, to be completely honest, but this team was built for the playoffs. Bobrovsky, we're not going to get as much love as he probably should for the Vezina Trophy. It's a regular season award, but he's one of the reasons, if not the only reason, that team was able to go and get it done, right? You had contributions from a guy like Sam Reinhart, who hadn't scored a lot until Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. You got a guy like Carter Verhaeghe, a Stanley Cup winner, have a ridiculous playoffs as well. And then, Barkov on both ends of the ice, offense and defense, was just one of the guys that was out there. Forsling had incredible playoffs for that team. So it was built well. It was built to win. And the longevity of the team, right? It's what can you do now to try and improve and to try and run it back if you're them. They went twice, 2 years in a row. Three times would be absolutely insane. But I thought that, maybe the Oilers didn't have too much gas left in the tank by the end of it. McDavid, Draisaitl kind of no-showed in Game 7 of that Stanley Cup Final. And it's tough, right? You come back from a 3-0 deficit. You give everything you possibly have, and you needed something from someone else other than your 2 big guns, and really they didn't get it.
Yeah, I found the Panthers a fairly likable team. Even Matthew Tkachuk has taken on, like, he's Matthew Tkachuk. He's always going to have that style that he plays, but I think he's toned down his act. He talked about that a little bit. Otherwise, to me, again, I love how aggressive Bill Zito has been in building this team. Like, he made the Tkachuk trade, to get Sam Reinhart out of Buffalo. Again, you have to have the chips to be able to make those types of trades, but has added some nice pieces. Forsling sort of falling into their hands and becoming the player that he's become.
Yeah.
Good on him and good on them. We haven't talked about him, but
good for him.
What a 12-month span for him. Gets the 20 schmil, get out of here, and finds a home in Florida, and is slotted properly. And there's still life in him as a bottom pair guy that could step up and take on more, and was running their power play first unit late in the Stanley Cup Final. To get his hands on the Stanley Cup, and obviously Roberto Luongo after all these years, to get as close as he did in 2011, and you could see what it meant to him, even as his playing days are behind him and he's moved into management. He's going to get his name on the cup, and when he was handed it, the celebration, and I love the shout out to Vancouver. Like, there is that bond. Undeniably, people here have been pulling for him. It's been a crazy relationship over the years when you think of Roberto Luongo and the drama in Vancouver, but there's no doubt after all this time, like his time in Vancouver, his association with the fan base here, it's real. And I thought that was cool to hear him shout out Vancouver in the moments after getting his hands on the cup.
I thought another thing was cool is, when do you see a member of a NHL front office go and be the guy that's the hype guy for the rink to get in? Like, I mean, he tweeted after, I beat the shit out of that drum, and he definitely did. And, you know, he ended up going to obviously raise the Stanley Cup after, but you can just tell how much it meant to him, how much that city means to him and that organization. And obviously you love the shout out that he gave the Vancouver Canucks fans, because yes, Jeff, there is definitely that bond, and he was so close here. Right. Yeah. One win away here. You're one win away again as well. You know, I guess more than that because they were up 3-0. But, you know, you have that opportunity, and for him to go and do that, it was really cool to see.
Yeah. Well, anybody that's been a regular with us here through the playoffs knows that we have been checking 4 wins for 4 Wins Brewing. And of course, it started with 16 teams. The Canucks were part of that. It got down to 8. They were part of that as well. Got edged by the Oilers. Came up short than the conference final, narrowed it down to 4, and finally 2. And the Florida Panthers, that last team to get 4 wins in 4 different rounds. And as a result, they are the Stanley Cup champs. And we've certainly had fun charting the bracket as we've gone here through the postseason. And we thank 4 Wins Brewing for their support. 4 Wins, family owned and operated out in Delta. Check out the 4 Wins Brewing tap room and kitchen, located in the Tilbury area, serving beers, burgers, and their famous tacos every day from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. And we always tell you about 4 Wins and the light lager, a crisp, clean, easy drinking beer, a beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, during the game. Hey, it would be perfect for the draft, for the awards, or free agency. Ask for it at your local liquor store, or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at 4winsbrewing.ca. It was interesting when you talked about McDavid and Draisaitl sort of fading the last couple of games. I mean, McDavid wins the Conn Smythe, rightly so. Did stuff that we haven't seen since Gretzky and Lemieux. 42 points in 25 games, 10 more points than anybody else in the playoffs. Or Evan Bouchard was next with 32, and then Leon Draisaitl had 31. You know, what's kind of interesting and didn't get talked about an awful lot is Barkov and Tkachuk led the Panthers 22 points in 24 games. So they didn't even have a point per game guy in the postseason, but they had, that depth. Carter Verhaeghe led them with 11 goals, Sam Reinhart 10, and his 10th was the most important because it turned out to be the game winner. But it really, sort of the classic case of a team effort. Not that the Oilers weren't, but that Florida team that it was depth throughout the lineup, and obviously goaltending, it got a little squirrely for them in the middle of the series, but Bob was Bob. Came up big, and they win the cup. So just, everybody always tries to figure, like, what is the blueprint? Can you, draw a through line from year to year? I think every year is a little bit different. Ultimately, you need best players to level up and show up and just be there night in, night out. McDavid took it to a whole new level for the Oilers, but the best Panthers ultimately were the best Panthers over the, course of 4 rounds of these playoffs.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why, they're the Stanley Cup champion. They needed them to be their best when they were their best. I think the Bobrovsky story was interesting. Their goalie coach out there told him to stay away from the rink on the Sunday before the game, and Bobrovsky said it. He went away from hockey. He didn't practice. He went and spent time with his family, and he came back, and he was that brick wall, right? The Oilers' best players couldn't get by him. Janmark was the only guy that scored against him in Game 7 of that Cup final. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of things have to come together in order for your team to win. Now, whether it's your best players being your best players, whether it's your goaltending, whether it's your depth scoring, all of it needs to come together. You're not just going to go in on 1 or 2 lines and win yourself a Stanley Cup. And I think that, the model of, the Florida Panthers, you look at it getting now back-to-back, the Vegas Golden Knights, what they were able to do in going to win. It's a model a lot of teams are going to have to look after now and try and build their team and find different ways to improve and eventually get there, because it is really the hardest trophy to win in sports. And I don't even think that's a secret. I think that, other people from other sports will disagree, but you got to play a lot of hockey and be really lucky, and everything has to go your way in order to win. And that's why the Florida Panthers won.
Yep. And every year we hear about injuries after the fact. Yeah. And you're right. Like, luck is a big part of that. You need your best players to stay healthy, to be available, to perform at or near the top of their game. And it's just a lot of hockey in a compressed time span, and it does take its toll. And so, without a doubt, good fortune on the injury front plays a massive role. Just ask the 2011 Canucks. They would tell you by the end, attrition had set in there, and it just, they just didn't have enough left to give. All right, speaking of things to give here before we are done, what are we looking at in the way of hockey futures here now that the games are done and the draft is nearly upon us?
Well, I'm going to Vegas for the draft and obviously the awards and things like that. So we thought about looking at some of the odds for the draft and who's going to go first overall and things like that. Absolutely no secret that Macklin Celebrini at minus 20,000 is going to go first overall there, but there is some value, right? I think beyond Macklin Celebrini, you can find value of other guys going second or third in the draft. If you are one of the draft enthusiasts that wants to go out and do that and put some shekels on the draft order or things like that, you can always do it over on Bet365. As this segment is brought to you by our good friends at Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres and Price Canucks Conversation, and yes, us here at Rink Wide Vancouver. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use the code VAN bonus. Interesting. It's never ordinary when you see a guy at minus 20,000, Jeff, to be the first overall consensus guy there. It's funny, you heard Mike Greer talk about and, meet with the family and kind of let his name slip, but who they're picking and where it's going. And Rick Celebrini, obviously his father with the Golden State Warriors, it just makes all the sense in the world and good for Macklin, right? He's a kid that's, I think you and I remember when Rick was working for the Canucks, when he used to walk into the rink with all his boys wearing the jerseys and they were, so young. We see them and now he's getting one drafted. Obviously Aiden with the Canucks organization. Now you have Macklin that's going to go to the San Jose Sharks. So pretty cool, obviously tie into Vancouver as well.
Yeah, Vegas loves its long shots. This is anything but. That is a sure bet if ever there was one, Macklin Celebrini. But then it gets interesting. And as you said, with teams that have already talked about being willing to part with picks, we may see some trades on the draft floor on that first day on Friday night, round one on Friday, and then the subsequent rounds coming your way on Saturday. A reminder to subscribe to Rink Wide so that you don't miss out on any of the programming that we push out throughout these summer and off-season months. You can follow us on all our social channels, and we certainly encourage you to do that. And a reminder, too, that there are other options here under the Nation Network tent. Sekeres and Price going every day with their thoughts on what's happening in Canucks Convo with Quads and Harm, and they'll be on top of things as well. They're down to 3 days a week, going Monday, Wednesday, Friday through the foreseeable future, but I believe they're giving it a full week's effort starting with Monday and free agency days. So check out all of the shows here at the Nation Network for the latest on the Vancouver Canucks and Canucks Army as well for all the written content there. I've got a couple of pieces coming up on the draft. I talked about, the history of the Canucks when they don't have a first rounder. I also just had some fun looking at some of the best later round picks over the history of the Vancouver Canucks. And you forget, so much attention on the first rounders that worked out, the ones that didn't pan out, but the Canucks have had some success deeper in the draft. And so I've kind of come out with a ranking of some of the best later round picks, fourth round and on through the years for the Vancouver Canucks. You can check that out at Canucks Army. All right, you got your bags packed. I'm a little bit jealous. It's always fun to go to Vegas, although probably could do without the 42-degree temperatures, but it is air conditioned inside the Sphere. So know that much at the very least. Safe travels and have some fun. And let's hope that we all have some fun here over the next week, that fireworks fly and that, we start to see what the Vancouver Canucks are going to look like and start to take shape here as they build their roster for 2024-25. This next week's going to be telling for the Vancouver Canucks. And at some point, some shoes are going to have to drop here in the way of news. And we'll reconvene and do certainly a show right after free agency. Once we have a better sense of what the Canucks were able to accomplish. We've got Jacob and Mike working hard behind the scenes, so I always like to give them a plug for their part in putting a Rink Wide together. For Irf, I'm Jeff. Thanks so much for checking us out here at Rink Wide Vancouver, brought to you by the Applewood Auto Group and the Vancouver Canadians.
Thanks for watching this video. For more great content from Canucks Army, check out Sekeres and Price, Rink Wide Vancouver, or our show, Canucks Conversation. We're your one-stop shop for interviews, breaking news, and a live Canucks postgame show hosted by Jeff Patterson.